Well, welcome to fifth generational warfare. Information, misinformation, gaslighting, propaganda and the such like. This is an intellectual war. Let's go back to Sun Tzu. He said, to fight and conquer in all our battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Okay? And that's what we've all been subjected to. Military-grade psychological warfare. So let's start with a few examples of that. Some you'll be familiar with, I'm sure. Number one, induce fear. If you can put people into a state of fear, you are returning them to a childlike state. It switches off your critical thinking abilities. Basically, fear makes you stupid. This quote gets attributed to Joseph Stalin. I'm not sure he actually said it, but it's certainly a truism. The easiest way to gain control of a population is to carry out acts of terror. The public will clamour for such laws if their personal security is threatened. Tactic 2, divide and conquer. No need to spend much time on this one, we're all familiar with it. It's basically getting you to argue amongst yourselves while the big stuff's going on behind the curtain. Michael Rosen. One of the great achievements of the modern media is to get people angry about the small fiddles and not know about the giant ones. One of the giant ones is the following. If we pop across the pond, this was the US national debt in January last year. It just ticked over to 30 trillion. It'd taken 247 years to get there. You might be surprised to hear that 21 trillion on top of that has been stolen. Those figures were brought to light by Catherine Austin Fitz and a professor at Michigan State University. I'm guessing no one read about that figure and grand larceny in any of the mainstream media. Tactic 3, inconsistency. Inconsistency is a way of destabilising and confusing the opposition. I would argue this is much more the reason it was done, rather than just incompetence. James Forrestal, December 1946, said the following: consistency never has been a mark of stupidity. If the diplomats who have mishandled our relations were merely stupid, they would occasionally make a mistake in our favour. So we're not dealing with incompetence, we're dealing with minions working to a script. Tactic 4, propaganda. You could probably do a whole talk on this one. I'm just going to cover it in one quote, which I think is quite interesting, from Eric Hoffer, I think written in the 1950s. Propaganda does not deceive people. It merely helps them to deceive themselves. Tactic 5, weaponise morality. Sociopaths always gain control of people with morality because the sociopaths have none, and the people who do don't understand that until it's too late. So what we're looking at here is a predator-prey model. It's a bit like a mouse trying to impart its value system to a cat. It's not going to be very successful, and it's a triumph of hope over experience. We've also seen guilt-tripping and word-shaming. This is more weaponisation. You're anti-this, you're anti-that, you're an XYZ denier. Once you understand these are all just tactics in the psychological warfare, then they don't have any effect on you anymore. Tactic 6, obedience. This is probably our biggest problem. Why? Because we've seen from the Stanley Milgram experiments in the late 60s that when people are tested, most people will do what a figure in authority says, regardless of the consequences. So in this particular example, for those not familiar with it, there were two people involved. Candidate A would go into a hidden room, and candidate B would be asking that person some questions. There was also a gentleman in a white coat stood next to candidate B, in case he had anything to say. So, and the idea was every time candidate A got a question wrong, then candidate B would have to give them a small electrical current put through it, electric shock. Now, every time he got another question wrong, they would ramp up that electric shock up to a maximum of 450 volts, which is more than enough to kill anyone. Unfortunately found 70% of people without any coercion, because all that was said was the experiment requires you to continue if they queried it. 70% were willing to think that they killed the other person. In fact, they didn't actually get any shocks, they were just acting, but that person didn't know that. So obedience is a huge problem, particularly when you're dealing with corrupt systems. Howard Zinn, 1970. Civil disobedience is not our problem. Our problem is civil obedience. Our problem is that numbers of people all over the world have obeyed the diktats of leaders of their government, and millions have been killed because of this obedience. So just a friendly reminder, obedience, doing what you're told regardless of what is right. Morality, doing what is right regardless of what you're told. Tactic 7 is the big lie. If someone tells you a lie, sometimes you can spot it, maybe body language, vocal tonality, that type of thing. If someone tells you a huge lie, it's more difficult to spot, and that sounds counterintuitive. Why? Because the big lie is more credible by being incredible. I.e., you can't wrap your mind around something, or the general public can't wrap their mind around the fact that this level of evil would be carried out, and therefore dismiss it instantly, even as a possibility. 2 quotes on this. Herbert Marshall McLuhan. Only the small secrets need to be protected. The big ones are kept secret by public incredulity. And J. Edgar Hoover from the FBI. The individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists.